Silver Hollow, Wyoming Territory, late spring, 1874. A small wooden church on the edge of town. The pews creaked beneath the weight of stiff backs and stiffer hearts. Outside, the wind stirred up a fine coat of dust that settled on the chapel windows, softening the late afternoon light. Inside, silence had a sharp edge, broken only by the hesitant clunk of a wooden foot on aged floorboards. Eliza May stood at the threshold of the aisle, her hands clenched tight around a wildflower bouquet. Her dress was simple, white muslin, hand-stitched with care and uneven seams. It clung modestly to her thin frame, the hem lifting slightly over her right leg, revealing the leather boot on one foot and the polished curve of a wooden prosthetic on the other. The hush in the room was heavy, but not kind, eyes cut like knives. "She is limping," a woman whispered behind her fan. "I heard she cannot even walk a mile without falling," murmured another. "Poor Samuel, the boy's gone soft in the head," a rancher scoffed from the front row. "Marrying the help? And a cripple, no less." A low ripple of laughter echoed in response, quickly masked behind hands and handkerchiefs. Eliza's face burned, but she kept moving. Step, drag, step, drag. Each thud of her wooden foot sounded louder than the church bell on Sunday. Her mother sat alone in the back pew, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, her hands folded in her lap like a prayer left unanswered. No bridesmaids, no music, just dust motes and judgment. Eliza's breath caught as her leg wobbled near the halfway point. She steadied herself, gripping the pew beside her. Her vision blurred for a moment, not from pain, she was used to pain, but from the weight of 100 watching eyes. Then, boots tapped the floor. From the second row on the groom's side, Samuel Delaney stood. He wore a crisp white shirt beneath a brown leather vest, a black silk neckerchief tied just right. His dark coat bore the faint scent of saddle oil and the trail, and his black hat cast a shadow over eyes that never wavered. Without a word, he stepped into the aisle. Gasps rose like a wave. Eliza froze. Samuel's spurred boots clicked softly with each step until he reached her side. He looked at her, truly looked, and the chaos of whispers faded. He did not ask. He did not hesitate. He bent down and lifted her into his arms. "Eliza," he said softly, "only for her. You've walked enough." Then he turned toward the crowd, his voice calm but carrying. "She does not walk because she must. She walks because she refuses to let the world decide her worth." A pause. Then louder, steady as stone. "I carry her now because I choose her, with all my heart and both my feet." A silence followed, vast and electric. The room had no answer. Eliza's head pressed against his chest, her breath trembling, her bouquet slipped slightly, petals brushing his shoulder. Samuel took the next step. And then another, each stride cut through shame like wind through wheat. He carried her past every eye that had mocked, every mouth that had whispered. The aisle was no longer hers to cross alone. And no one dared speak again. 13 years earlier, Silver Hollow, Wyoming Territory, 1861. Eliza May was born into dust and dishwater. Her earliest memories were of heat, of the sun baking the dry fields around Silver Hollow, of the wood stove where her mother stirred endless pots for the Delaney family, and of her own tiny hands, red from scrubbing floors before she could write her name. Her mother, Ruth, was a servant for the largest ranch in the territory. The Delaneys owned thousands of acres of wild land, cattle by the hundreds, and more pride than kindness. Ruth earned their keep with quiet obedience and a bent back. Eliza was always close behind, watching, learning when to speak and when to disappear. Their cabin was a lean-to on the edge of the ranch. 2 beds, 1 lamp, and a patched window that looked out over the hills. Eliza grew up watching the Delaney house from a distance, like a child staring into a world she was never meant to enter. When she was 8, everything changed. It was late spring, the river was running high from the snowmelt, and the cattle were restless. Eliza was playing near the corral with her younger brother, Jonah, who had just turned 5. A sudden shout rang out, followed by the panicked thundering of hooves. A mare, spooked by a snake, reared back and broke loose. Jonah froze. Eliza ran. She shoved him out of the way, just in time, but the horse's iron-shod hoof caught her right leg. The pain was lightning, screaming, blood, bone, and then darkness. When she woke, the world had changed. The doctor said the leg couldn't be saved. Infection had set in too deep. A traveling carpenter carved her a wooden prosthetic, shaped rough but sturdy. It pinched, it scraped, it ached in the cold. But Eliza never complained. "What's done is done," her mother said, placing a hand on her daughter's forehead. "The world don't wait for limping girls." So Eliza learned to walk again, not with grace, but with grit. She walked through pain, through laughter behind her back, through stares that lingered too long and pity that stung worse than hate. Children at church would whisper and giggle. The baker's son called her "stump girl" once. He never did again, not after Eliza slammed her lunch pail into his nose. She got a whipping for it but didn't cry. She never cried. By 15, Eliza was working in the Delaney kitchen. Ruth's health had begun to fail, and someone had to keep the job. She chopped onions until her eyes burned, carried heavy pots that made her shoulder throb, and scrubbed floors long after everyone else had gone to bed. The servants mostly ignored her, though some offered quiet kindness. The Delaneys barely saw her at all, except for him. Samuel. The Delaneys' only son, tall even at 17, with the look of someone who belonged to open skies. He rode horses like he was born in the saddle and spoke little, but when he did, people listened. Eliza tried not to watch him, but she did. From the kitchen window, she watched him breaking colts in the field, laughing with the ranch hands, walking alone under moonlight. Once, she caught him pausing at the edge of the creek behind the house, picking up a bird with a broken wing and wrapping it gently in his kerchief. That night, she dreamed of hands that healed instead of hurt. They did not speak. Not yet. But Eliza felt something shift, deep and quiet, like spring thaw under frozen soil, a warmth she dared not name. Silver Hollow, 1871. Samuel Delaney had the build of a man grown fast and early, broad shoulders, weathered hands, and a jawline that looked carved from the same stone as the hills beyond the ranch. At 20, he already towered over most men in town. His voice was low, seldom used, and his gaze held a weight that made liars uneasy. He was his father's only son, heir to a kingdom of cattle, land, and expectation. But he was not his father. Nathaniel Delaney ruled his ranch like a warlord, ruthless, commanding, never wrong. The help feared him. The ranch hands obeyed him with the kind of loyalty bred more from fear than respect. Samuel, though born of that same blood, carried himself differently. He listened more than he spoke. He tipped his hat to the kitchen girls. When a stable boy dropped a pail of water near the horses, Samuel didn't shout. He simply helped mop it up. He was often seen alone at dusk, walking the fence line, checking gates with his gloved hands, as if making sure the land still breathed beneath his boots. And sometimes Eliza saw him watching her. Not with pity, not with curiosity, just seeing. She remembered the first time he spoke to her. It was a chilly evening in late October. Eliza, now 18, was hurrying through the main hall carrying a tray of tea when she slipped on a loose rug. The tray clattered to the floor, hot tea splashing against her arms, porcelain shattering. She froze, heart racing, waiting for the wrath she knew would follow. One of the elder maids sneered. She ought to know better than to run on one good leg. Before the scolding could land, Samuel stepped forward. "It was the rug," he said plainly. "I saw it slide earlier. Should have said something." He knelt beside her, picking up the broken cup. "I'll clean this up. You all go on." Eliza stared, stunned, but said nothing. Later that night, she found a note tucked beneath the cracked saucer in the kitchen. "Try honey for the burn. It helps. S.D." That was how it began. No declarations, no grand gestures. Just glances exchanged across the barnyard, a brief conversation while tending horses late at night. Samuel would ask about her leg, not in the way others did, not with condescension, but curiosity, respect. Does it ache in the cold? Sometimes, she'd admit, but not enough to stop walking. He liked that answer. One night, after the others had turned in, Eliza was carrying feed through the side hallway when she was shoulder-checked by Miss Tabitha, a distant cousin of the Delaney's, visiting from the city. The girl sneered at her, called her a limping shadow. Eliza lost her footing and fell hard, her leg twisting awkwardly beneath her. Pain flared white-hot. Before anyone could move, Samuel appeared, out of nowhere it seemed. "Get away from her," he said, voice low and sharp as a blade. He knelt beside Eliza, ignoring the shocked faces around them, and gently lifted her into his arms. She tried to protest, breath shallow. "I'm fine." "No," he said simply, "you're not." He carried her out into the night, past the house, to the small cabin where she and her mother lived. He set her down on the cot, lit the lantern, and without a word, took off his gloves. With calloused fingers, he rolled up her skirts to the knee, inspecting the swelling. He tore a strip from his own undershirt and began to wrap her leg, slow and careful. The silence was full, not empty. When he finished, he looked at her and said, "Next time she lays a hand on you, you tell me." Eliza blinked. Why would you care? Samuel didn't smile. He just held her gaze a little longer than he should have. "Because someone ought to." Silver Hollow, 1871, 1873. The space between silence and longing. There was a tree behind the old chapel, an aspen with a crooked trunk and a hollow at its base. Most folks in Silver Hollow had long since stopped attending the church, claiming the roof leaked and the preacher drank. But for Eliza and Samuel, the chapel became something else entirely. Their sanctuary. Over the course of 2 years, they left letters tucked inside the tree's hollow, folded scraps of parchment, ink sometimes smudged, always unsigned. He would write about the horses, about the color of the morning sky. She would write about the sound of the creek near their cabin, about the dreams she barely dared to dream. He called her Liza Dove in every letter. No one else ever had a name for her that soft. They never spoke of love directly. They did not dare. But the truth was there, in every carefully chosen word. Samuel taught her to ride on quiet Sundays, taking the back trails behind the ranch, far from watching eyes. He'd help her mount, never hurrying, never flinching at the sight of her wooden leg. His patience was endless. "Balance comes from the hips," he said one afternoon, walking beside the horse. "You do not need 2 legs to command a creature, just heart." She had plenty of that. When she faltered, he steadied her. When she doubted, he reminded her, not with speeches, but with his presence. And when she asked, half joking, "Why are you doing all this?" he answered without looking up, "Because I like seeing you free." They found moments when the world turned its back, moonlit meetings in the barn, a glance exchanged across Sunday supper, a fleeting brush of fingers as she handed him coffee in the morning. But love, even whispered, does not go unnoticed for long. Nathaniel Delaney was not a man easily fooled. He noticed the changes in his son, the quiet smiles, the early rides, the late returns. One night, Samuel came home after midnight, boots muddy, a small ink stain on his cuff. His father was waiting. "What's her name?" Nathaniel asked without preamble. Samuel didn't answer. "What's her name, boy?" Still silence. That was enough. The lash came down hard. In the barn, where no one could hear over the wind and the braying of horses, Nathaniel Delaney beat his son with a braided leather whip, meant for wild stallions. Samuel did not cry out, did not explain, did not name her. From the shadows beyond the paddock, Eliza watched it all. She had come to bring a letter. She saw the first strike, and then the second. Her breath caught in her throat as she stumbled backward, hand over her mouth, heart pounding. He never saw her there. She ran, blinded by tears, the letter crushed in her fist. The next day, he left no note, but she found a single feather tucked into the hollow of the aspen, white, soft, like a dove's. She kept it beneath her pillow. From then on, they were even more careful. No more late-night meetings, fewer letters, more silence. But the love did not fade. It deepened, quiet and defiant, a truth they both carried like a hidden scar. He bore his pain without bitterness. She bore hers with quiet fire. And together, they learned to wait. Spring, 1874, the storm before the vow. The deal was made over whiskey and cattle counts, not love, not character, and certainly not consent, just ledgers and legacy. Mayor Whitmore of Grafton had a daughter named Abigail, a woman of silk gloves, imported perfume, and a gaze that often lingered too long on her reflection. She had no fondness for ranches, or dust, or men who smelled of horses, but she was willing to do her duty, so long as the price was right and the altar grand. Nathaniel Delaney, meanwhile, had everything but peace. Land stretching beyond the horizon, cattle by the hundreds, a family name that opened doors, and a son who refused to walk through them. To Nathaniel, this marriage was business. It would tie Delaney cattle to Grafton rail. It would put banks in his pocket and newspapers in his favor. It would clean up his son's reputation and wash away that girl, the one with the limp and the stubborn heart, the one who didn't belong. The agreement was drafted in a single evening, a fall wedding, big, public, profitable. When Samuel heard it, he didn't shout. Not at first. He simply said, "No." Nathaniel blinked, slowly. "No?" "No," Samuel repeated, louder this time. The third time, it came with fists slamming the dinner table, silverware rattling against glass. "I'm not marrying for land." Nathaniel didn't blink again. He didn't shout back. His voice was soft, calm, almost surgical. "You marry her," he said, "or I clean house." He meant it. "I'll cut every man who's ever called you friend. I'll burn the cabins that aren't in my name. And that girl," he paused, leaning forward, "she'll be gone by sunrise. I've already written a man in Missouri. They take broken ones there. Laundry work, maybe even teach her to keep her eyes down." Samuel's breath caught in his throat, his fists clenched tighter. "She's not livestock," he growled. "No," Nathaniel said. "She's worse. She's in the way." The silence that followed wasn't peace. It was war gathering breath. Samuel stood without a word and left. He walked straight into the storm, fists buried in his coat, wind tearing at him like his father's words. Lightning danced across the plains. Rain lashed the dirt like judgment. He did not come back until nightfall. In her cabin, Eliza sat sewing by candlelight. Her mother slept nearby, breath soft and slow. Eliza's hands trembled more than the flame. She hadn't eaten. She'd heard whispers, enough to know something was happening, enough to feel the cold in her bones wasn't just from the season. Then, a knock. Soft, deliberate. She opened the door, and there he stood, soaked through, shivering, jaw bruised and stiff. In one hand, a coiled rope. In the other, a ring made of twine. "I don't have diamonds," he said, voice torn from wind and fury. "But I have this, and my name," and a horse saddled and ready. Eliza stared. He stepped closer. "I would never ask you to run if I thought you deserved less. But I won't let them trade my life for land, and I sure as hell won't let them treat you like cattle." His voice broke then, not from weakness, but from weight. "If you say yes, Liza Dove, I will choose you. Over money, over family, over everything. In tellin'." For a moment, thunder filled the silence between them. Then she stepped aside. He entered. She took the twine in her hands and slid it onto her finger. It fit, barely. But the promise inside it? That fit just fine. Back inside the wooden chapel where they held their wedding, after the whispers, the stares, and the weight of every cruel word, Samuel had lifted Eliza into his arms and declared her his wife before the whole town. Now, gently, he set her down on the front pew, the one reserved for brides, right beneath the pulpit, where the preacher stood clutching his worn Bible with trembling hands. Eliza's wooden leg rested awkwardly beneath her white muslin dress, her bouquet still clutched in both hands. Her chest rose and fell with quiet force, her eyes fixed only on the man who stood beside her. Samuel remained on his feet, unwavering. The preacher cleared his throat. "Shall we begin the ceremony?" Samuel gave a firm nod. A hushed murmur moved through the pews. One man whispered, "This is madness." But no one dared speak louder than that. As the preacher lifted his Bible, just as he opened his mouth to begin, the ground itself seemed to respond. The sound of galloping hooves echoed from the distance, sharp, rhythmic, thunderous. Then came boots on wood. 6 men in dust-stained vests and holstered guns pushed open the chapel doors. Behind them came Nathaniel Delaney, tall and stone-faced, framed by the dying light of afternoon. The crowd tensed. Samuel didn't flinch. Eliza's hand found his again, and he squeezed it tight. Nathaniel's eyes scanned the room. He didn't speak, didn't need to. His gaze settled on Eliza, dressed in white at the altar, and the contempt in his silence was deafening. The preacher stammered, Should I continue?" Samuel looked straight ahead. "Read it." The preacher swallowed hard and lifted his voice. "By the power vested in me by the territory of Wyoming, and in the presence of God, I now pronounce you husband and wife." The air shifted. Samuel turned toward Eliza. "You're mine now, Liza Dove." He bent low, pressed a kiss to her forehead, then lifted her into his arms once more. Together, they walked down the aisle, not with defiance this time, but with reverence. The chapel doors swung wide, and sunlight poured in golden across the wooden floor. The crowd parted in silence as Samuel stepped outside, Eliza's veil catching the wind. But before they could cross the threshold, 6 armed men blocked their path at the church steps. Samuel stopped, his jaw tensed. He gently set Eliza down on the top stone. Her hands clutched his sleeve. "Stay here," he said softly. "I just need a minute." Then he turned to face them. The first man lunged. Samuel caught him with a swift elbow to the ribs. Another swung wide. Samuel ducked and drove a punch into his gut. A third came in fast. Samuel spun and sent him sprawling with a boot to the chest. 3 down. But there were more. 2 others grabbed him from behind, locking his arms. A flurry of fists followed, hard, merciless. Blood spattered across Samuel's shirt. His hat flew off. He groaned, but didn't fall. Eliza screamed his name. She tried to rush down the steps, dragging her wooden leg, but one of the men held her back. Samuel struggled, breaking free long enough to drop another man with a wild right hook. But he was tired, bleeding, surrounded. He fell to one knee, then stood again, staggering, breathing hard. His eyes never left hers, and that was when Nathaniel Delaney stepped forward. He watched his son, battered, bruised, defiant. Samuel stood, fists clenched, shielding the woman his father had tried to erase. Nathaniel's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his gaze. Then, with a single nod, he said, "Enough." The beating stopped. The ranch hands froze, then backed away. Nathaniel turned without a word. He mounted his horse and rode off into the horizon, leaving silence in his wake. Eliza broke free and limped to Samuel's side. His knees buckled into hers as she dropped down and wrapped her arms around him. He tried to smile through the blood. "Told you, I just needed a minute." She laughed through tears, clutching him tighter. There were no cheers, no victory. Just 2 souls who had nothing left except each other. The hill beyond Silver Hollow, early summer, 1874. Eliza's arms wrapped tightly around Samuel as their horse carried them away from Silver Hollow, away from blood, from judgment, from the Delaney name. The wind tore at her veil as it slipped free, catching on the breeze like a ghost left behind. The sun dipped low behind the hills, bleeding orange and gold into the sky as the two lovers vanished over the ridge. By the time they reached the small cabin nestled beneath the bluff, Samuel was barely conscious. The place had once been a trapper's shelter, long abandoned. Over weeks of stolen nights, they'd scrubbed it clean, patched the holes, and laid straw for bedding. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. Samuel slid from the saddle with Eliza's help, half falling into her arms. She gritted her teeth, ignoring the pain in her wooden leg, and hauled him inside. His weight was heavy, deadened by blood loss, but her heart beat louder than the ache. Inside, she lit the oil lamp with shaking hands. She laid him on the bed, a frame of cedar limbs and an old wool blanket. His shirt was torn, soaked through with blood. She peeled it away gently, revealing bruises darkening across his ribs, gashes across his shoulder. "Samuel," she whispered, brushing hair from his face. "You stubborn, beautiful fool." She moved like a shadow through the room, boiling water, mixing herbs, tearing strips from an old bedsheet. Her limp grew worse by the hour, but she didn't rest. Through the night, the wind rattled the shutters, rain tapped gently on the roof. The cabin smelled of pine resin and iron. He didn't stir. Eliza sat beside him, wiping sweat from his brow, changing bandages, whispering words she'd never dared say before. "You're safe now, we're safe, no more hiding." The candle burned low, melting wax across the table. As dawn painted the sky in pale lavender, Samuel finally stirred. His eyes fluttered open, blurry and confused, then focused on her. She had fallen asleep beside him, her upper body sprawled across the edge of the bed, one hand still wrapped tight around his. He smiled. She didn't wake, not yet, but her fingers twitched slightly in his grasp. When she did open her eyes and found him looking back, neither said a word. They didn't need to. Weeks passed. The bruises faded, the scars healed. Samuel limped less with each sunrise. He mended fences, chopped wood, rebuilt the stable behind their cabin with his bare hands. Eliza planted herbs and wildflowers along the path. She built a clothesline from old fence posts. Her laugh came more often now, light and real, ringing out over the hills. On warm evenings, they sat together on the porch, her head on his shoulder, watching the clouds roll by. One afternoon, she stepped barefoot into the garden, her wooden foot sinking into the damp soil. She laughed aloud, arms spread wide, her hair undone and wild in the breeze. Samuel stood by the fence, watching her, a hammer in one hand, peace in his eyes. They had no money, no family name left to speak of. But they had built something stronger than land or title. They had built freedom. And in that quiet valley beneath the sky, love took root in the dirt like something sacred. The hill beyond Silver Hollow, early winter, 1874. Frost clung to the corners of the window pane, turning the glass into lace. Outside, the fields slept beneath a thin veil of snow. Inside the cabin, the fire crackled low, and Eliza stirred a pot of tea as the wind whispered through the trees. A knock came at the door. Not loud, not urgent, just a tap, as if the air itself had something to deliver. She opened the door and found no one, only a small parcel wrapped in worn cloth, tied with a strip of leather. No name, no seal, just a weight that felt heavier than it should have. She brought it inside. Samuel looked up from the chair where he was carving a wooden saddle horn, his body still healing, but strong again. Eliza untied the cloth. Inside was a small leather pouch. She opened it slowly, breath caught in her throat. A metal badge slipped into her palm, the old insignia of Delaney Ranch, silver dulled with time, its letters still sharp. DR. Beneath it, a folded slip of paper. She opened it, hands trembling. A man is measured not by the land he owns, but by the love he protects. Take care of each other. N.D. N.D. Nothing more. No apology. No request. Just recognition. She didn't speak, just walked to Samuel and placed the letter in his hand. He read it. For a long time, he said nothing. Then, quietly, he nodded. They never spoke of going back. Silver Hollow had nothing left for them, not anymore. And yet, something in the wind had shifted. Something old had settled. Spring came late to the hills, but when it did, it bloomed with more than flowers. Eliza turned the cabin's front room into a schoolhouse. By mid-season, 12 children sat cross-legged on hand-woven rugs, learning to read, to count, to write their names without shame. Some were the children of farmers. Others were born from silence, or from nowhere at all. All were welcome. Samuel built a new barn and started hiring hands, not the strong or the feared, but the forgotten. Widows, drifters, a young Comanche boy who'd been run off by ranchers. They worked the land with bare hands and full hearts. No one asked for background. Everyone earned their keep. In the afternoons, the children played outside, chasing chickens, chasing sunlight, chasing stories. On one such day, Eliza sat on the porch with a book in her lap and a cup of warm cider in her hands. A boy, maybe 6, stopped at her feet, hair tousled, cheeks flushed from play. "Miss Eliza," he said, tilting his head, "why'd your husband carry you at the wedding?" She looked up. Across the field, Samuel was mending the fence line, shirt sleeves rolled up, a hammer in hand. His back was turned, but she could feel him, steady as ever. She smiled. Soft, sure. "Because he saw a heart worth carrying," she said, setting the book aside. Then she looked down at the boy, her voice gentle as the breeze. "And that kind of love never limps." The boy grinned and ran off, his laughter trailing behind him like sunlight. Eliza watched for a moment longer, then rose, stepping into the fading day. Her wooden leg pressed into the soft ground with every step, a sound she no longer hid. Samuel turned. Their eyes met. He smiled, just a flicker, quiet and full. Like the wind, like time, like a man who had fought the world for love, and won. The hill bathed in golden light as the sun began to set, stretching their shadows long across the land they now called home. Not rich, not famous, but free, and finally, whole. And that's how a battered cowboy and a girl with a wooden leg built something stronger than any name, any ranch, or any legacy. They built a life stitched from scars, rooted in truth and carried by love. Not every story from the Wild West ends in gunfire or gold. Some end in a quiet cabin, a letter from a changed man, and a kind of love that never limps. If this story stirred something in you, if it made you feel, remember, or believe, go ahead and smash that like button, drop us a comment, and most of all, we've got more heart-wrenching, soul-stirring tales of forbidden love, fierce loyalty, and second chances in the untamed American frontier. Tell us what part broke you, or healed you. And don't forget to ring the bell. You won't want to miss the next ride. Until then, where bullets missed, but hearts didn't.